Welcome to another edition of the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show, live on NFLExporter.com. I am your host, the NFLExporter, and I am extremely excited and filled with anticipation as we are 1 week away from the kickoff to the 2014 NFL football season with the Seattle Seahawks and Green Bay Packers. It is also going to get the fantasy football season underway. I know a lot of my fantasy football owners and players have been drafting over the last couple weeks, been doing a lot of mock drafts, been really taking note of what happened thus far in the preseason, especially this past weekend in week 3, where the starters played the first half and a little bit into the third quarter. And I know this upcoming weekend, this upcoming Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is the biggest weekend for fantasy football, as there'll be drafts taking place everywhere. Now, I know that, as I mentioned earlier, some people have been drafting the last couple weeks. You certainly are able to draft once the season starts, but most people, myself included, like to wait till the entire preseason is over so we can have an update on all the injuries, the depth charts, and everything that's going on with these teams and players before we go ahead and make our selections. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time or possibly have missed shows over the past couple weeks, we certainly have covered all of our bases here. The very first week, our debut show, we did a breakdown of the entire AFC conference. The following week, we did the same. We broke down team by team, division by division, the entire NFC conference. Last week, we started off our fantasy football section with our rankings for quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. And then today, we're going to wrap up our preseason by giving our rankings for the tight ends, the defense, special teams, and the kickers. Now, you want to make sure to join us each and every Tuesday right here on DerekShapiroShow.com at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you happen to miss that show, the show re-airs every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For some odd reason, if you miss both of those shows, no worries. Just come here to DerekShapiroShow.com. Click under Archives. You want to find the NFL Exporter. And the shows thus far have all been in the month of August. Now, you also want to make sure to link up with us on social media. You can find Derek Shapiro on Facebook and Twitter at Derek Shapiro Show. On Facebook, there's a picture of Derek with Wyclef John. And for myself, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. That's NFL Exporter. NFLExporter. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to go ahead and get our fantasy football rankings started with our tight ends. So don't touch that dial. It's the NFL Exporter, the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show, live on DerekShapiroShow.com. Welcome back to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show. I'm your host, the NFL Exporter, and you're listening to DerekShapiroShow.com. Now, let's go ahead and jump into our tight end rankings for this upcoming year's fantasy football for the NFL. Starting off, number 1 consensus, Jimmy Graham of the New Orleans Saints. Graham had 1,215 yards and 16 receiving touchdowns last year. Got paid a nice contract in the offseason, so he's fully happy and satisfied. Has one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL at Drew Brees passing the ball to him. Jimmy Graham is the top tight end coming into this season. He's going right around the bottom of the first round to the top of the second round. So if you plan on getting Jimmy Graham, you better get him quick. Next, we have Julius Thomas of the Denver Broncos. Last year was his first full season, over 700 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns. He's looking better this year. Peyton Manning is his quarterback, so you know that he's going to get a ton of targets. I've been seeing Julius Thomas go anywhere from the second to the fourth round, depending on how the draft is flowing, but I don't anticipate him being on the board for very long. So if you have an interest in Julius Thomas, who is the second overall tight end in fantasy football, you better make your move quick. Coming in at number 3, we have Rob Gronkowski of the New England Patriots. Now, we know that Gronkowski suffered an ACL injury that ended his season last year. Gronk has also had back surgery. He's had forearm surgery and suffered from a badly sprained ankle. We know that he is certainly one of the best tight ends and best players in the NFL when he's fully healthy. Word out of New England is that he has been participating in 11-on-11 contact drills. We expect him to be back week 1 against Miami, but I'm quite sure they don't want to rush him, so he will certainly be back sooner than later. Rob Gronkowski is your number 3 tight end in fantasy football this year. Next, we have Vernon Davis of the San Francisco 49ers. Last year, Davis had 13 receiving touchdowns and over 700 yards receiving. He's probably the fastest tight end in the NFL as he runs in the 4.3, 4.4 range. Definitely going to continue to be a huge part of this 49ers offense, especially in the red zone. I've been seeing Davis go anywhere from the 4th or 5th round, so if you're looking to grab Vernon Davis, plan accordingly. He's another tight end that won't be around long once you see Graham, Julius Thomas, and Rob Gronkowski off the board. Coming in at number 5 is the old trusty and reliable Jason Witten of the Dallas Cowboys. Witten has averaged over 80 catches, over 800 yards, and 7 TDs for the last 8 seasons. This guy is certainly a mainstay. The Dallas Cowboys are going to be on the football field, their offense, quite a lot this year, as they have one of the worst defenses coming into the season. And outside of stud wide receiver Dez Bryant, Jason Witten remains Tony Romo's top target. So if you're unable to get Graham, Gronkowski, Julius Thomas, or Vernon Davis, Jason Witten is definitely the next best option available at tight end this year. Coming in at number 6, we have Greg Olsen of the Carolina Panthers. Olsen has put up great numbers in Carolina the past 2 seasons since he's arrived from the Chicago Bears. This year, Cam Newton has all new wide receivers, and so Olsen will certainly be a security blanket and Cam Newton's most trusted option in the passing game. He's a big-time target in the red zone. Greg Olsen is certainly a viable option at tight end this year in fantasy football. Coming in at number 7, we have Charles Clay of the Miami Dolphins. Clay burst onto the scene last year with over 700 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. It's no secret this year. The Dolphins know what they have in Clay. He is trying to get back to 100% after having his knee cleaned out a couple weeks ago, but word coming out of Miami is that he'll be ready to go week 1 against New England. He'll be used a lot this year. I really like Charles Clay. He has a lot of upside. He is a solid start in fantasy football this year. Coming in at number 8, we have Jordan Cameron of the Cleveland Browns. Last year had 916 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. We know that the Cleveland Browns are still awaiting to hear the final decision on Josh Gordon, the stud wide receiver who led the NFL in receiving yards last year. With Gordon in the lineup, I think that Cameron certainly has a lot more value because Gordon certainly gets the defenses and secondaries utmost attention. If Gordon is not there, Cameron certainly is going to continue to be a heavily used target. But I hope that it can work out better than last year. The 916 yards you certainly love was amongst top 5 for tight ends in the NFL. But he only had 1 touchdown catch after week 4 last year. that type of production certainly isn't going to cut it in fantasy football. But with that being said, he is certainly a strong start this upcoming season for fantasy football. Next, we have Dennis Pitta of the Baltimore Ravens. Pitta missed the majority of last season with an injury, but he's back fully healthy. He's looked really good in the preseason. He is certainly one of quarterback Joe Flacco's favorite options. If you need a good, reliable tight end and you can't get any of the tight ends that I mentioned prior to Dennis Pitta, he is certainly the next best available option that will be left on fantasy football boards. Coming in next, we have Jordan Reed of the Washington Redskins. Had a very strong rookie season last year. This year, he has more explosive weapons in the passing game. The Redskins certainly have a strong running game. If RG3 can get back to form and be as accurate as he was as a rookie in the NFL back in 2012, Jordan Reed is going to be an excellent pickup and a strong start for your fantasy football team. Coming in next, we have Martellus Bennett of the Chicago Bears. Last year, Bennett had 759 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, and a lot of that was without starting quarterback Jay Cutler, who he has a tremendous rapport and chemistry with. Cutler is back under center this year. Martellus Bennett of the Chicago Bears also has some prolific weapons surrounding him. If you're unable to get any of the players we mentioned prior to Bennett, he is definitely going to be a strong start for your fantasy football team this year. Coming in at number 12, we have Jared Cook of the St. Louis Rams. Now, obviously, Cook's fantasy value just took a hit. The Rams just lost their starting quarterback, Sam Bradford, for the entire season. And so we have to wait to see if backup quarterback Sean Hill is going to be able to effectively use Cook how Bradford was. But you would certainly think so. He's a tight end. He's going to be in the immediate view of his quarterback. Cook has top-end speed. Certainly can get behind linebackers and safeties. And now that the Rams are going to run a more simplified offense, I certainly think that Jared Cook is a solid option for your fantasy football team. Coming in at number 12, we have Kyle Rudolph of the Minnesota Vikings. Would not be surprised to see Rudolph's value increase a little bit. The Vikings have finally named their starter in Matt Cassell. And so now he'll have to have time to build chemistry with Rudolph. Rudolph had 9 touchdown receptions back in 2012. Fought through some injuries last year, but he really worked hard in the offseason. He shed about 15 pounds. Happened to see him a couple weeks ago against the Arizona Cardinals. He's a big-time target in the red zone at 6'8". This guy has a lot of upside. The Vikings have some viable weapons in the passing game, and they have the all-pro running back Adrian Peterson. Kyle Rudolph will be an excellent pickup for your fantasy football team in later rounds and will certainly give you some quality depth if you happen to pick one of the other players that we've mentioned beforehand. Coming in next, we have Zach Ertz of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is an interesting situation right here with Ertz and the next 5 players that I'm going to mention. Now, Zach Ertz, Brandon Pettigrew, Kobe Fleener, Jermaine Gresham, Antonio Gates. Now, all of those players started for their teams last year and put up some good fantasy numbers, but all of those players are going to be sharing time with some other tight ends as well. So let's go back and start with Zach Ertz. Now, I apologize, let me make that revision. Ertz was a rookie last year, so actually Brent Selleck was the starting tight end in Philadelphia. It looks like they're going to split time this year. So both of them are going to have their opportunities at getting targets. We know that the Eagles have one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. But based on what I've seen in the preseason, I think Ertz has a little bit more upside. When it comes to the Eagles getting in the red zone, it seems that quarterback Nick Foles likes to find this big target. And so it's going to be real interesting to see how this timeshare works out. I don't think there's really any way to find out exactly which tight end is going to be more productive until a couple weeks in the season. But if we're going on upside and individual talent, I'm giving Zach Ertz the nod as being your guy from the Philadelphia Eagles to start at tight end. We spoke about Brandon Pettigrew. He was the starting tight end for the Detroit Lions last year. Another very explosive offense with Matthew Stafford, Reggie Bush, Megatron, Calvin Johnson, players like that. Now, Pettigrew has had problem catching the football and fumbling, which allowed for backup tight end Joseph Fourier last year to come in and make a splash as he became a big-time target for Matthew Stafford in the red zone. And then the Lions went out this year and drafted another tight end in Eric Ebron, who has good hands and good speed, is a versatile player. And so I'm unsure of which one of these Detroit Lions tight ends is going to come to the forefront and be the main guy. But getting your hands on one of them once we know that outcome, and again, for these tight ends we're speaking of, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 or 4 weeks for us to really determine who is the lead guy. But whoever steps up in Detroit is certainly a good option at tight end for your fantasy football team. I spoke about Coby Fleener. Now, Dwayne Allen was actually slated to be the starting tight end in Indianapolis last year. Got hurt in the preseason, missed the entire season. So Coby Fleener, who's a very good tight end, came in and had a very productive fantasy football season. He has a great chemistry with quarterback Andrew Luck. They actually attended the University of Stanford together. Came out the same year, so they've been together for 3 years. But the word out of Indianapolis is that Allen is a better blocker, and he's also slightly a better receiver catching the football. And so this is certainly another situation that we want to monitor. But I'm giving Dwayne Allen the slight edge here because he's a better blocker, so he'll probably be on the football field a little bit more. Jermaine Gresham was the starting tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals last year. Gresham, however, has underachieved since coming to Cincinnati. The past couple years, he struggled with fumbles. He's also struggled with penalties that have really hurt the Bengals. They drafted Tyler Eifert last year out of Notre Dame, had an excellent rookie season, and I certainly think that Eifert has more upside and a higher ceiling than Gresham. However, Gresham has really worked hard. He had a touchdown in the game a couple of days ago against the Arizona Cardinals. So it's going to be real interesting to see how this situation plays out. But if you had to go on individual talent, I would probably give the slight edge to Tyler Eifert. Antonio Gates, the future Hall of Fame tight end for the San Diego Chargers, was the starter last year. And there's without question he's going to be starting again this year. At age 34, he still had 77 catches and over 800 yards last year. But the Chargers have a young emerging tight end in Ladarius Green. He has a lot more speed, and Phillip Rivers and his offense have been finding ways to utilize him a lot more. Now, I'm still going to give Antonio Gates the edge. He certainly has the longest tenure in San Diego and great chemistry and rapport with quarterback Phillip Rivers. But Green is certainly worth noting. Once Gates decides to hang the cleats up, Green is certainly going to be a top 15 tight end candidate in fantasy football. Now, for those tight ends we just discussed, we'll be checking in weekly on their status to kind of help determine which way that we want to go. But all of those guys have a ton of talent. It's going to be real interesting to see how the situation plays out. A couple other tight ends that are definitely worth noting here. Next, we have Heath Miller of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Miller's a little bit older himself, but the Steelers have young wide receivers. They lost Emmanuel Sanders to free agency. They also lost Jericho Cotchery. So Antonio Brown is really the only proven wide receiver on this Pittsburgh Steelers roster. And that means that Heath Miller is certainly going to get a ton of targets, especially in the red zone. I like Heath Miller a lot. He's a sneaky pick. I'm not sure if I would start him weekly, but he certainly is worth being on your roster. He's going to have some good weeks, and we need quality depth. And so Heath Miller is certainly a good option for your fantasy football team. Next, I have Scott Chandler of the Buffalo Bills. We know that the Bills have a very young quarterback and second-year guy, E.J. Manuel. He wants to be efficient with the football. The Bills definitely have some capable running backs to set up play-action pass. And quarterback E.J. Manuel's been struggling in the preseason, so I'm quite sure he's going to be looking to make some easy throws to gain some rhythm and confidence in his game. And a tight end like Scott Chandler is certainly that guy. Had over 50 catches last year. Scott Chandler is definitely a good tight end for fantasy football. Now, a couple other guys who are very interesting prospects for me this year is Zach Miller out for the Seattle Seahawks. We know that Russell Wilson specializes in play action pass. Miller certainly is a guy who can get up the field. We've seen him connect with Russell Wilson a couple times in the preseason. He's also a big body that Russell Wilson likes to use inside the red zone in the goal line area. So I think he's a player that's worth noting. And then Andrew Corliss out in Green Bay has an elite quarterback in Aaron Rodgers tossing the football. Rodgers obviously has some dangerous weapons at wide receiver. And so Andrew Corliss might be a player whose stock is rising in fantasy football, who you might not be surprised to see in some people's starting rotations as the fantasy football season wears on. Now we're going to get into our backups. These are players that I wouldn't recommend starting, but are certainly noteworthy in mentioning. You have Tuo Lolu. Now he's replacing Tony Gonzalez with the Atlanta Falcons. We know that the future Hall of Famer Gonzalez was gobbling up about 80 catches a year in that pass happy Atlanta offense. So it's going to be real interesting to see if he can fill in. We certainly don't expect him to fill Tony Gonzalez's shoes. I don't know if there's any tight end who can do that. But we mentioned that the Falcons like to pass the football an awful lot. It'll be interesting to see if this guy can become a part of the equation and be fantasy football relevant. There's an interesting situation going on out in Tampa Bay. Now, they brought over veteran Brandon Myers. You have Timothy Wright, who was solid as a rookie last year. And then the Buccaneers went out and drafted Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who's a very talented player out of the University of Washington. Again, I don't know which one of those three players is going to step up and take the leading role, but the Buccaneers have an explosive offense if they can put it all together, and one of those tight ends will be in single coverage a lot, have a capable quarterback in Josh McCown. Watching to see which tight end emerges out there in Tampa Bay is certainly something we're going to be doing. Mercedes Lewis. He's out with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We certainly expect that Jaguars offense to be on the football field an awful lot this year with how bad their defense is. And it looks like the way that they're going to be able to move the ball is through the air. Lewis is a 6'7" target. He's been hooking up with Chad Henne in the preseason. And so Mercedes Lewis is definitely another fantasy football tight end that could be a sleeper and give you some nice production if you can find the right matchups to utilize him in. We also have Anthony Fasano out for the Kansas City Chiefs. We know that Alex Smith is a tight end friendly quarterback, and they don't have too many weapons in the passing game over in Kansas City, so Fasano can be a guy who gets a lot of targets and, again, should be a guy who can give you some nice production if you can catch him on a nice week. Another guy I think that's worth noting here is Adrian Robinson of the New York Giants. Eli Manning is another tight end friendly quarterback. The Giants don't have a ton of weapons in the passing game. They've dumbed their offense down to more of a West Coast style short passing game, which certainly means that Robinson will get his fair share of targets. We'll see if Manning uses him in the red zone. Last but not least, I have Michael Riviera of the Oakland Raiders. Matt Schaub has proven to be a tight end friendly quarterback, especially in the West Coast style of offense the Raiders are running. Schaub is very familiar with that from his days with the Houston Texans. Riviera has good hands, runs good routes. The Raiders are another team that don't have bona fide weapons at wide receiver in the passing game, although Denarius Moore, James Jones, and Rod Streeter are some good players. Michael Riviera is another player who I wouldn't be shocked to have some double-digit weeks in fantasy football. All right, that's going to wrap up our fantasy football rankings for our tight ends. And in case you're just tuning in, our top 5 receivers are Jimmy Graham, Julius Thomas, Rob Gronkowski, Vernon Davis, and Jason Witten. Our 6 through 10 tight ends are Greg Olsen, Charles Clay, Jordan Cameron, Dennis Pitta, and Jordan Reed. And then rounding out the players who are worth starting are Martellus Bennett, Jared Cook, and Kyle Rudolph. We're going to take a quick commercial break. It's the NFL Exporter. You're listening to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show on DerekShapiroShow.com. Don't touch that dial. Thank you for returning. It's the NFL Exporter. You're now listening to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show on DerekShapiroShow.com. And now we're going to move over into our defense and special teams rankings for the 2014 fantasy football season for the NFL. Coming in at number 1 is without question the Seattle Seahawks. They are led by the vaunted Legion of Boom secondary with Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas. Have some talented linebackers and Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, Malcolm Smith. They're able to bring the pressure up front with Bruce Irvin and Cliff Averill. I really like what they did by bringing in big defensive tackle Kevin Williams from the Minnesota Vikings. And to give their defense and special teams an added boost, you have arguably the best kick and punt returner in the NFL in Percy Harvin, Levine. So if you're looking for a stout defense, look no further than in the Seattle Seahawks defense. Coming in at number 2, we have the San Francisco 49ers. Now the Niners defense will not be in full rounded form until the second half of the season. They have a couple issues that they have to address and deal with. Now when they are fully healthy, they have the best linebacker core in the NFL with Ahmad Brooks, Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis, and Alden Smith. But Bowman suffered an ACL injury last year and is going to be back somewhere in the second half of the season. And then Alden Smith is still waiting word from the league office, but he'll be facing a suspension for X amount of games. That remains to be seen. And so they're certainly going to have some players step up, but it's very hard to replace Bowman, who was an all-pro at inside linebacker last year, and Alden Smith, who's one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL. Now the 49ers also have 2 new defensive backs, and so we want to make sure that they can stand their ground. But with all that being said, they still have enough star power led by inside linebacker Patrick Willis. And I think that the chemistry and the system has been in place long enough that this 49ers defense will continue to remain very stout. Next, you have the St. Louis Rams, led by their vaunted front four with sackmaster Robert Quinn, the engine that never stops, and Chris Long. In the middle, you have big Michael Brockers, along with their first round draft pick, Aaron Donald from the University of Pittsburgh. I also love their linebackers with James Laurinaitis and a big-time playmaker in Alec Ogletree. The secondary is a little shaky, but they also have Tavon Austin, who's one of the fastest players in the NFL, returning kicks and punts. He's always a threat to go to the house when his hands is on the football. Next, we have the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals recently took another hit to their defense, so their ranking may take a little bit of a slide. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but they're playing without their best 2 players on their respective levels. They're going to be without Darnell Dockett, who suffered an ACL injury. He's going to miss the entire season. And then their Pro Bowl inside linebacker Darrell Washington is also suspended for the entire season. So they've got some work to do in their front 7. But I really like their secondary. They have lockdown corners Antonio Cromartie and Patrick Peterson. And then Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, is an up-and-coming player at safety. Patrick Peterson is always a big-time threat in the punt and kickoff game. And to give him a slight rest, they brought over Ted Ginn Jr. from the Carolina Panthers. He has big-time speed and is a very effective kick and punt returner. Coming in next, you have the New England Patriots. The Patriots are stacked up on the defensive side of the football this year. They're really going to benefit by having lockdown defensive backs Darrelle Revis and Brandon Browner, who came over from the Seattle Seahawks. Both of those guys are able to hold their own in one-on-one coverage, and that's going to allow for a lot of flexibility on the front side for Coach Bill Belichick with the likes of Jared Mayo, Donta Hightower, and Chandler Jones. Next, we have the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Packers are another team who recently took a hit to their front line. They lost their defensive tackle, B.J. Raji, for the year with a tricep injury. But with that being said, they still have Clay Matthews Jr. They brought over Julius Peppers from the Chicago Bears. They have Nick Perry, Dante Jones. And so they certainly have some nice playmakers in their front seven. And then this is a pretty solid secondary with the likes of Tramon Williams, Sam Shields, Casey Hayward, Morgan Barnett, and their first round draft pick, Clinton Dix from the University of Alabama. They also have Randall Cobb, who runs back their punts, and he's a very dangerous guy in the open field. Coming up next, you have the Chicago Bears. Now, the Bears defense is a little bit different from what we've seen in past years. Brian Urlacher's no longer there. We mentioned the loss of Julius Peppers. But I still think that they have enough guys. And that team has really made a living off of turnovers. I think that mentality remains the same. They did bring over Jared Allen, the big-time defensive end from the Minnesota Vikings. You still have Lance Briggs anchoring that second level there at outside linebacker. And then they have one of the best defensive back duos in the NFL with Charles Peanut Tillman, who's known for stripping the ball and making turnovers. And also defensive back Tim Jennings, who was a Pro Bowler last year. And so you certainly like what the Chicago Bears defense can bring to the table. Now next, we have some stingy defenses out in the AFC North. I'm going to start with the Baltimore Ravens. I really like what they have going on in their front seven, the likes of defensive tackle Haloti Ngata, rookie defensive tackle Tim Jernigan from Florida State. You have Courtney Upshaw. You have Elvis Dumervil. You have outside linebacker Terrell Suggs. You have the Ravens' first draft pick C.J. Mosley. And so these guys on that front seven are really stout. Really see that front seven coming together and gelling, being able to stop the run and get a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And then they have some solid defensive backs in Ladarius Webb and Jimmy Smith. So I certainly like what they are bringing to the table. And then Jacoby Jones always gives you some extra boost. He's one of the top kick and punt returners in the NFL. Next, you have the Cleveland Browns. Now, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this Browns defense this year because their offense certainly is not up to par. But you still have the likes of Big Phil Taylor at defensive tackle. You have Paul Kruger, Barkevius Mingo at outside linebacker. You have defensive back Joe Hayden, who's a Pro Bowler and a shutdown cornerback. And then they drafted Justin Gilbert to play the other defensive back. They brought over the hard-hitting Dante Whitner from the San Francisco 49ers. And so, again, this team's going to have a lot of pressure. That defense is going to be expected to kind of carry the weight for this team. But they certainly have the playmakers in the system in place. It's a very aggressive and underrated defense. I think this will be a defense that, especially at home, will do some major things. Next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, a little bit of concern with the Bengals defensive line coming into last season. They had one of the best defensive lines in the NFL with the likes of Geno Atkins, Michael Johnson, and Carlos Dunlap. Unfortunately, Atkins suffered an ACL injury halfway point of last season. Watched him in the preseason game a few days ago against the Arizona Cardinals. He's not back to full strength yet, so we certainly have to see that he's going to be able to get back to playing at that elite Pro Bowl level. And then Michael Johnson took his services to Tampa Bay as he was a free agent. And so I certainly want to see that front line tough, but they certainly have some playmakers in the second level with Vontez Burfict and Ray Malaluga. And then you have some savvy veterans at defensive back with Leon Hall and Terrence Newman, and some nice depth with Adam Jones and rookie DeQuez Denard from Michigan State. Next, we have the Denver Broncos. Now, we know that the Broncos were able to make some nice additions to their defense with the sack master DeMarcus Ware coming over from the Dallas Cowboys. They added Aqib Talib from the New England Patriots. He's regarded as a shutdown cornerback. And then they brought over TJ Ward, who's a good safety from the Cleveland Browns. You know that the Broncos put up a lot of points. Teams are usually playing catch up, which allows for the defense to pin its ears back and get after the rushing the passer. And Von Miller's another guy. I certainly think that him and Ware can become one of the most feared pass rushing tandems in the NFL this season. If he can get back to full strength, he's still trying to get back to his full abilities after suffering an ACL injury last December. Next, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, last year, the Chiefs really excelled, had 47 sacks, 21 interceptions, a couple touchdowns, really got after opposing offenses and kind of really spearheaded that Chiefs team. Well, this year, they're bringing the majority of the troops back. You have Dontario Poe, who's one of the young and upcoming best defensive tackles in the NFL. When it comes to rushing the passer, a very revered tandem in Justin Houston and Tamba Ali. Derek Johnson's a playmaker at middle linebacker, and Eric Berry is one of the best free safeties in the NFL. The Chiefs also have rookie stud DeAnthony Thomas from the University of Oregon. He'll be taking care of business running back punts and kickoffs. We've already seen him return a punt 80 yards for a touchdown in the preseason. Next, you have the New Orleans Saints. Second-year defensive coordinator Rob Ryan certainly has some weapons in his arsenal. Defensive end Cameron Jordan certainly starting to make his mark in the NFL. He's very capable of getting after the quarterback. You have Curtis Lofton, who's very tough at stopping the run. And I really like this Saints secondary. They brought over veteran Champ Bailey from the New Orleans Saints. He'll certainly be able to fit into this scheme and system. You have Keenan Lewis, as well as third-year guy Patrick Robinson. And then the Saints have one of the best safety tandems in the league. They brought over ball hawking safety Jarius Byrd from the Buffalo Bills. And second-year player Kenny Vaccaro just continues to get better and better with each game. They also drafted Brandon Cooks, who is very dangerous in returning punts and kicks. Next, how about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? They have a very good front line. Gerald McCoy has finally found his touch. He made the Pro Bowl last year at defensive tackle. They have defensive end Adrian Claiborne, who continues to get better with each year. And then, as I mentioned, they brought over free agent Michael Johnson from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a very good player. On the second level there, you have Levante David. Certainly had a great year last year playing linebacker. Was all over the football field. He certainly found his zone. And then in the secondary, you have a nice safety tandem in Mark Barron and Deshaun Goldson. Next, we have the Carolina Panthers. Now, the secondary is a little suspect, but the front seven is very aggressive, and they make life easy on that secondary. We're talking about Greg Hardy and Charles Johnson, one of the best 1-2 punches at defensive end in the NFL. You have big defensive tackle Star Luatelli. You have returning defensive player of the year Luke Kelce. And outside linebacker Thomas Davis. This is an aggressive unit here. You certainly want to watch out for the Panthers when you can find some good matchups with them. But across the board, they're very sound, very solid. I like what they bring to the table, especially rushing the passer. Next, we have the Detroit Lions. Have some big guys up front, and Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley, who can get after the quarterback from the defensive tackle position. You have second-year defensive end Ezekiel Ansai. He's certainly improving his play. Some underrated linebackers in Stephen Tulloch and DeAndre Levy. My only concern about this Detroit Lions team is their secondary, which has proven to be suspect over the years. Next, I have the Houston Texans. I really like what they're bringing to the table on defense. You have big-time Pro Bowl tackle J.J. Watt, defensive tackle J.J. Watt. You have number 1 overall pick Jadeveon Clowney, who's certainly shown flashes of greatness in his rookie year. You have Brian Cushing returning. And then at defensive back, you have Jonathan Joseph and Kareem Jackson. this is certainly a unit that if it can get back to playing how it did a couple years ago, they're definitely capable of turning that football over and getting your fantasy football team some nice points on defense. Let's talk about the Miami Dolphins. Now, this team certainly has capabilities of being a top 10 defensive unit on paper. You have the elite pass rusher in Cameron Wake. On the opposite side of him, you have Vernon Oliver. You have big Jason Udrick and Randy Starks in the middle. Has some good linebackers in Donnell Ellerbe and Philip Willer. They have a nice 1-2 punch at defensive back with Cortland Finnegan and Pro Bowler Brent Grimes. And they brought over Louis Delmas, an underrated player from the Detroit Lions. This guy certainly knows how to put a big hit down. Very instinctive player who seems to make turnovers and come up with big plays at the right time. Next, we have the Buffalo Bills. I like their front line as well. You have Kyle Williams and Marcel Darius, one of the best 1-2 punches at defensive tackle. You have Big Mario Williams, Super Mario, getting after the quarterback. He's still a very, very good pass rusher. At linebacker, you have Brandon Spikes. You certainly would give the Bills defense more of an edge if they had their returning Pro Bowl second-year linebacker Kiko Alonso, who unfortunately is going to miss this year with an ACL injury. And then the Bills secondary is a little bit suspect, but if that front seven can play well, that'll certainly help them to get some turnovers. And the Bills defense, if nothing else, plays really well at home. Next, we're talking about the New York Jets, another team whose secondary is weak, but they certainly can get it done on the front seven. You have returning Defensive Rookie of the Year Sheldon Richardson. You have Muhammad Wilkerson, who's certainly a versatile defensive end. You have Calvin Pace, Quentin Coples, and inside linebacker David Harris. D. Milner is a second-year defensive back trying to make a name for himself. But as I mentioned, this Jets secondary certainly is going to have to show and prove. Next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Certainly have some good players there. You have Trent Cole and Connor Barwin, who can certainly get after the quarterback. Fletcher Cox is in his third year. He's leading the charge up front in the trenches. D'Amico Ryans is a very instinctive and smart inside linebacker. Michael Kendricks, his play continues to improve on a game-by-game basis. And then at defensive back, you have Kerry Williams, and I really like the Eagles bringing in veteran safety Malcolm Jenkins from the New Orleans Saints to team up with Nate Allen. Darren Sproles was also brought over to the Philadelphia Eagles. He'll without question give them an added boost in the kickoff and punt return game. Next, we have the Oakland Raiders. Now, if this team can put it together, certainly some turnovers can happen here. They brought over Lamar Woodley from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They brought over Justin Tuck from the New York Giants. They went out and drafted Khalil Mack, who can get after the quarterback as well, out of the University of Buffalo. And so when you look at their front seven, they can certainly get after the quarterback and cause some turnovers. The Oakland Raiders are going to be an underestimated defense, but that offense is going to have to play well to take some pressure off of these guys. Also worth noting is the Washington Redskins. I have a couple guys who can get after the quarterback on the front line. They brought in Jason Hatcher from the Dallas Cowboys. You also have Brian Orakpo and Ryan Kerrigan. And then they made some upgrades in the secondary. Now we know that D'Angelo Hall is certainly a defensive back who's able to find his way to some interceptions and some touchdowns throughout the course of the season. And then I like them bringing over Ryan Clark from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's going to be a leader in that locker room and be a guy who can keep all the pieces in place on the defensive side of the football. Now, taking a look at these last defenses, I certainly wouldn't recommend them. But if you can find the right matchup, or, hey, maybe one of these defenses will be better than we expect, they'll be worth adding to your fantasy roster as well. When we take a look at the Tennessee Titans, I think they have the best shot at doing that. They have some playmakers in regards to Bernard Pollard, who's a hard hitter at safety. Michael Griffin is certainly a guy who covers a lot of ground. I like Jason McCourty at defensive back. Akeem Ayers, Sean Phillips, Zach Brown, very good linebackers. And so this Tennessee Titans defense, I certainly think, is one to keep your eye on. We can't forget about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I'm a little bit reserved on them. They certainly have one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, in Dick LeBeau. But I just don't see the pieces being in place like we've been accustomed to seeing in past years. Now, with that being said, If Jarvis Jones, their draft pick from last year, can step his game up and get some pressure on the quarterback. You still have Lawrence Timmons, who's a very good inside linebacker. Rookie Ryan Shazier has certainly impressed in preseason. Ike Taylor is still a very sound defensive back. And then Troy Polamalu, we'd like to see him getting back to playing at an elite level and forcing some turnovers. But all in all, the Steelers defense is aging. And we're certainly going to have to see what happens. They are not the vaunted defense that we've known from 5 years ago with the likes of Casey Hampton and Brent Kiesel and Lamar Woodley and James Harrison and Larry Foote, and Ryan Clark and those type of guys. Also, you have the Indianapolis Colts. We know that Robert Mathis, if nothing else, he knows how to get after the quarterback. He's going to start off the season with a 4-game suspension, but when he comes back, he's going to have some fresh legs. You also have DeQuell Jackson coming in from Cleveland. He's a good inside linebacker. And LaRon Landry's a hard-hitting safety. For the Minnesota Vikings, certainly a very intriguing situation here. Sharif Floyd is a defensive tackle who underachieved last year. They're expecting for him to step his game up. You have a couple guys at defensive end, and Brian Robinson and Everson Griffin, who can get after the quarterback. Chad Greenway is always playing at a Pro Bowl level at outside linebacker. Brinkley's tough at inside linebacker. And rookie Anthony Barr out of UCLA has certainly been impressive thus far in the preseason. He's a guy who can stop the run, but really excels at rushing the passer. I think the Vikings secondary is where our concerns lie. I have some young players there, and Xavier Rhodes, he's in his second year out of Florida State. They did go out and get Captain Munnerlyn from the Carolina Panthers. And I like Harrison Smith at free safety. He's entering his third year. The Atlanta Falcons, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Dallas Cowboys, and the New York Giants are certainly defenses that you don't want to entertain. But if you had to take a look at any of them, I would probably say that the Giants defense has the most upside. They still have Jason Pierre-Paul who can get after the quarterback. John Beeson's a veteran inside linebacker. And Antrel Rolle is certainly a bright spot. He's one of the best safeties in the NFL. The Giants did also go out and get some depth at defensive back with Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie and Walter Thurman. Both of those defensive backs were in the Super Bowl last year. Rodgers-Cromartie with the Broncos and Thurman with the Seattle Seahawks. That's going to wrap up our segment for our fantasy football rankings for defense special teams. In case you missed it or just tuning in, number 1 is Seattle Seahawks, followed by the San Francisco 49ers, St. Louis Rams, Arizona Cardinals, New England Patriots, Green Bay Packers, Chicago Bears, the Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, Denver Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs, New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Detroit Lions, and the San Diego Chargers. I did leave the Chargers out, but they have some very tough players. I wouldn't be afraid to start them. They have Eddie Royal returning punts and kickoffs, and on defense you have the likes of Corey Legend, Kendall Reyes, Manti Te'o, Melvin Ingram, Eric Weddle, and I really like them going out and getting defensive back Brandon Flowers from the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, we'll be back after these messages. Once again, it's your host, the NFL Exporter, the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show on DerekShapiroShow.com. Thank you for coming back to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show live on DerekShapiroShow.com. Just in case you're tuning in, we've already did our rankings for our tight ends as well as our defense special teams. We're going to go ahead and get into our kickers next to end the show. But before we do that, let's make sure once again you know how to listen to the show. Each and every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come back here to DerekShapiroShow.com to listen to the Final Wrap. If you're unable to listen to the show on Tuesday, The show re-airs every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then if you're unable to catch either one of those shows, you can always go to the archive section here on DerekShapiroShow.com. Look for NFL Exporter, and all of our shows thus far have been in the month of August. And then you certainly want to hook up with us online. To hook up with Derek Shapiro on Facebook, go to Derek Shapiro Show. There'll be a picture of Derek standing with Wyclef Jean, the former Fugees group member, legendary hip-hop artist. And then you can also find Derek on Twitter at Derek Shapiro. For myself, you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and LinkedIn at NFLExporter. On LinkedIn, the link may possibly say Lance Goodman, so you can find me there. And then my YouTube channel is NFL Exporter. You can simply put NFL Exporter on DerekShapiroShow.com in the search engine, or simply click on channels, enter NFL Exporter, and it'll pull up all of my recordings. The way that you can find me on all my social networks, you spell NFL Exporter NFLExporter. All right, let's move over into our kickers. The top fantasy football kicker coming into the season was Matt Prater of the Denver Broncos. However, his stock just took a major hit. He's going to miss the first 4 games of the season due to a suspension in violation of the alcohol substance. So when he returns, we think and expect for him to continue to lead the Broncos, but missing the first 4 games of the season certainly doesn't allow for him a roster spot, at least to start off the season. Next, Stephen Gostkowski of the New England Patriots. We know that the Patriots are one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL. He'll continue to give you good points and value on a week in and week out basis. You have Nick Novak of the San Diego Chargers. We know the Chargers move the ball up and down the field. He's certainly a very productive kicker. You have Phil Dawson of the San Francisco 49ers. We know the 49ers get in field goal range a lot. He'll boot it through for you. You have Steven Hauschka of the Seattle Seahawks. Had a great season last year. Certainly expect him to do the same. You know, with that vaunted defense and Russell Wilson, he certainly scores a lot of fantasy football points from the kicker position. You have Adam Vinatieri of the Indianapolis Colts. He's inside in the dome. You know that Vinatieri's been kicking forever and a day. Very reliable and trustworthy kicker there. Shane Graham of the New Orleans Saints. We know the Saints put up a ton of points. Graham will be an excellent fit for that team. You have Robbie Gould, the mainstay, has been booting for years out in Chicago. He'll continue to put up the points for that Bears prolific offense. How about rookie Nate Freese for the Detroit Lions? We know that Lions offense is very explosive. He should have more than his fair share of opportunities this season. We have Matt Crosby for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers in that offense is very effective. We know that Crosby has seemed to regain his confidence and groove, so he'll be a nice pickup for your team. You have Alex Henry of the Philadelphia Eagles, another very explosive offense. He'll certainly have his fair share of double-digit days in fantasy football. How about Ryan Suckup of the Kansas City Chiefs? Was one of the top kickers last year. The Chiefs are unable to convert a lot of their red zone attempts into touchdown, and that allows him to capitalize. Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens, similar situation. The Ravens seem to have a tad bit of trouble converting touchdowns in the red zone. Tucker definitely is one of the better fantasy football kickers. And then how about a couple guys who can nail it from deep out? You have Blair Walsh of the Minnesota Vikings. He'll certainly is accurate kicking the football from about 55 yards out. Greg Zuerlein should be a pretty good play for you this season. That Rams offense will struggle a bit, but Zuerlein plays in a dome. He's capable of hitting from 50 to 55 yards. And then without question, Sebastian Janikowski, who broke the NFL record with a 63-yard field goal last year. This guy is a big-time leg. Not a lot of fantasy football relevant Raiders, but Sebastian Janikowski is certainly a guy who can get the job done. Now, some other fantasy football kickers who should be effective this year. You have Mike Nugent out with the Cincinnati Bengals. You have Graham Gano of the Carolina Panthers. Sean Swisham with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Matt Bryant is always a good play for you. He's the kicker for the Atlanta Falcons. You have Dan Bailey. We know that the Dallas Cowboys, especially at home, move the football up and down the field. You have Jay Feely for the Arizona Cardinals. You have Connor Barwin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How about Caleb Sturgis for the Miami Dolphins? You have Dan Carpenter of the Buffalo Bills. Nick Folk has been a steady kicker for years for the New York Jets. Billy Cundiff will certainly have more than his fair share of field goal opportunities out with the Cleveland Browns. You have Randy Bullock kicking for the Houston Texans. Josh Scobie for the Jacksonville Jaguars, very accurate kicker out there. You have Brett Kern for the Tennessee Titans. That guy has a big time leg. And then you have Josh Brown of the New York Giants. Now that's going to wrap up the fantasy football section for today. In case you missed it, our top field goal kickers for this year, again, is Matt Prater for the Denver Broncos, but he is going to be out of action the first 4 weeks, so if you draft him, he's certainly a guy you want to stash until he comes back into action. After him, Stephen Gostkowski of the New England Patriots, Stephen Hauschka of the Seattle Seahawks, Phil Dawson for the San Francisco 49ers, Nick Novak for the San Diego Chargers, Adam Vinatieri for the Indianapolis Colts, Shane Graham for the New Orleans Saints. We have Matt Crosby for the Green Bay Packers, Nick Freese with the Detroit Lions, Alex Henry for the Philadelphia Eagles, and we also have Ryan Suckup for the Kansas City Chiefs, Justin Tuck for the Baltimore Ravens. All are worth a starting 9. And then our honorable mentions are from some guys who can boot it deep, that being Blair Walsh and Greg Zuerlein, both accurate kickers from 50 to 55 yards, and Packers. And the guy with the biggest leg in the NFL, Sebastian Janikowski for the Oakland Raiders. Now, everyone, make sure to be here next Tuesday as we do our first show for the NFL regular season. I'm very excited about that. We're going to be looking forward to that first game between the Seattle Seahawks and the Green Bay. And when we do next week's show, we're going to give our predictions for who's going to win each division, some MVP candidates, talk a little bit more fantasy football, and also give our predictions as who we think is going to win the Super Bowl, and just talk about some of the most relevant and recent headlines heading into the 2014 NFL season. Once again, I'm your host, the NFL Exporter. Everybody have a safe and productive week. I'll also be talking to you next week and revealing to you I've got 3 big fantasy football drafts over the weekend, so I'm certainly looking to capitalize and cash in there. So we'll have a lot to talk about next Tuesday on the Final Wrap. Make sure to be here 7 p.m. Eastern. I am your host, the NFL Exporter, signing off for the Derek Shapiro Show.com. 1100.